Here's a quick look into today's episode.
Here's a man that was, in the eyes of the world, has made it, but he was looking beyond the Army about what's next in service. And so when I do look back, I never had a conversation about what's next really without discussing with my wife. To me, my wife and family was the ultimate next. And I'm interested in what they had to say, but people are hungry for knowledge and truth. And for good counsel. You know, for me, it's godly counsel and wisdom, and that's why I look towards scriptures, but also men and women that I know read the word. I believe in John 17:17 says, "Thy word is the truth, sanctify them with the truth." I'm only interested in the truth, so I read the word. But I think for your podcast, you have always had an interest in developing and bringing up others. I remember the conversations, the LPDs, and the ideas you would throw up with me with your platoon leaders and what you were discussing. And I love the professional development we had at 175, even from our boss at the time, Colonel Foster. He was very interested in developing young officers. And I tried to even bring that here, that same type of development and hunger that you had. You know, I've started a leadership program here at Samaritan's Purse because I want to influence the next generation. So I talked to you about my identity. That was hard. But one thing I do realize, I thought when I left that headquarters, the Special Operations Headquarters at Bragg, I would never see talent like that again. And man, God slapped me across the face quick when I got to Samaritan's Purse. I call it slumming for Jesus. There's a lot of people here at the ministry that have been called here that are incredible talent, and they could be making a lot of money somewhere else, but they felt called here. And so I don't want frivolous risk takers here. I want prudent risk takers at the ministry. I want people that are willing to get out of the boat. And this is ultimately the story about why I got out of the Army. We can maybe talk about that later, is I wanted to be part of a miracle. So I had to get out of the boat. And that goes along with the scriptures, where Peter walked on water. And that's ultimately what I read one day when I decided to get out. But I want people here willing to walk on water, to lay it all on the line, willing to make a mistake. But to do that, I got to create an environment that I'm not going around slapping hands and, people are afraid of taking a risk or afraid of failure. I want people not afraid of failure. And the military and the Army doing live fires and preparing for combat TFTs, all that prepared us that we were going to make mistakes in training, don't do it in combat. So as commanders, as company commanders or XOs, what I loved and what I still love today is the knock at the door. You earn the knock at the door. Jerry called it, earn it for the phone call. I want the knock at the door that says, "Sir, can we talk?" In the military, I could not stand up in my formation and I couldn't preach the gospel. I couldn't evangelize. I was not allowed to do that. But I lived my life separately. I was one of the few Ranger officers that probably didn't dip, drink, smoke, Copenhagen. My vice was sweet tea from Bojangles. But I wanted to live my life. So when they knocked on my door and said, "Hey, sir, my wife's leaving me," or "Hey, sir, I'm in debt," or "I'm having trouble with painkillers," or even better yet, "Hey, she's finally pregnant." Like, I love the victory conversations. So today, for the first few years, I did get a lot of still military conversations, but I'm aging out. Like, a lot of the guys are retiring, there's still a bunch in, but I am aging out. So thus there is going to be an attrition of those phone calls. But I love earning the right for the phone call. And I still get there. Like, I just had my RTO, Larry, who's still in, he just hit me up and asking for a sit-rep check-in and telling me about what he's working on. I love that. Like, earn the right for the knock at the door. If you want to be part of a miracle in life, you got to get out of the boat. And that's why I made the military become my comfort zone. I was surrounded by my peers. I'd figured out how to be successful. And ministry scared me. And to be honest, being a Graham scared me. I was running a little bit from that because the expectation was you got to be Billy Graham or you got to be Franklin Graham. No, it's okay just being Edward Graham. I did my own path, but I needed to get out of my comfort zone again. And that's why I left. So that's the whole story about walking on water and getting in. I'm treading water, so I'm not walking on it. But God's hand moved. It all started because I watched an objective on the screen one night in the JOC when I was at Fort Bragg, and it's a house I've been in twice before. And you were next door to it one night, to be honest, when you were out there. But I went there as a lieutenant, captured the father years later as a task when I was the bastion commander. I killed the son, who was now the head and the mirror of Al-Qaeda out there, and now the other son's there. And I just really went home to visit Mama. I was like, this doesn't end. And I want to be part of something that lasts forever. And so I left and went to the ministry. but the Army prepared me for that decision.
Welcome to another episode of Teach Me to Fish, where our purpose is to help leaders better understand what drives people. In today's world, the core of recruiting and retaining talent revolves around leadership, and not just average leadership, but motivated, values-based, inspirational leadership. Our purpose is to get a little bit better every day. Progress equals small victories and stacking habits. Habits like getting up early, working your butt off, learning something new, being positive, and surrounding yourself with phenomenal people.
What's up, Matt?
My man, look at you
You
all
look
looking
handsome.
professional.
Hey, the guy, well, I'm usually in a tie and shirt, but ever since I'm on crutches, what you don't see is it's a lie off camera. My foot's at an angle. I'm laying it on a pillow. But they were all talking about your collection behind you, and they're like, we should do that for you. And I was like, oh, this guy, he listened to the Funky Bunch. He used to go around in his time machine truck and go out to Bojangles and go listen to the Funky Bunch.
It's all true. It's all true.
So, how you doing, buddy?
How are you? I'm so good it's criminal. Yeah.
And your daughter at West Point's in her junior year?
Junior year, yeah. Ryan just started as a junior. Isn't that crazy?
Everyone I talk to says she loves it, which is a different experience than what I had. So I'm glad she loves it, but I did not like it. I did it because I mean that's where God called me. But man,
Yeah.
I know your family's excited. So does she know what she wants to branch yet?
She's thinking about aviation right now. That's the one that she keeps coming back to.
That's awesome.
yeah.
But that was not even an option for me. It was based off class rank, so it's not going to happen.
She's doing good in school. She's doing good in volleyball. She's doing good all the way around. She's enjoying it. She's talking about like field artillery a little bit too. And no, man, I want to talk about everything. I appreciate the opportunity to catch up and get it. Selfishly, I'm the one that like benefits the most from every one of these conversations because I get like personal counseling for like an hour to 2 hours with whoever I get to do it with. And so like, I really appreciate it, especially since, everything that's going on in our lives and things that are going on in your life and like, and also the people that I talk to outside the podcast, right? That people that I just talk to every day. There's a lot of people right now that are kind of going through transitions in their life. There's a lot of people that are having to make big decisions. There's a lot of people that are trying to raise kids. They're trying to do all these things, right? And the whole point of the podcast was just a way of sharing the things that I've learned, the people that I've been surrounded with my whole life that have helped me, raise my kids and make my decisions and stuff. And so like, if I can share that in any way, shape or form with people, that's what I was hoping to share and talk about today.
Well, that's good. I just tell people the only thing I was good for Matt LeClaire, I was a stand-in on his kickball league when he had to deploy it. I was rear D. That was all I was good for was stand. I wasn't very good at that too. I don't think his team liked me very much. They liked my wife, but they didn't care for me much. But
yeah. Make no mistake. We recruited you guys so that we would get Kristy and you would bring her. That's right. That's why we did it. Yeah. I want to go and I hope the conversation goes in so many different ways. There's so many different things that I wanted to talk with you about today, but like I personally I wanted to get advice from you and like hear from you the things that you went through that I'm about to go through, kind of right now. And then, some of the things that you learned going through that process and you've learned like years later now that you've been through it. But I think the biggest theme is like what I want to hear from and talk about is like how when you first told me like you were going to get out of the Army, right? And I remember it was at that photo that I sent you at Bojangles, and you told me, you're like, I think I'm going to do it, and I think I'm being called finally to do this, and and because I feel like I'm in a similar place like right now where it's been years coming, and I finally feel like it's that time is coming now.
Man, I look at your career and, being enlisted and then becoming an officer. Of course, you and I met at 175 for the first time. Matter of fact, I remember going into the battalion headquarters. I just showed him, you're coming out. So I see a major, I'm a captain. I'm like, hey, sir. And you're like, hey, Ed, you're already like being, and he's like, I'm Matt, I'm the S4. So then I realized, okay, we're peers. But you instantly like made me feel at home. and like welcomed me as a team player, and that I appreciate. But as you ask about transitioning and, things I learned, I didn't want to get out. First of all, I loved it. I loved the military, and I was called to it, I believe. I, the challenge for me, it just happened like overnight one night. It really did. It wasn't something I was struggling with. It's something that I came, and then once that God's hand moved, I knew it was time for me to get out. But the process of getting out, it's difficult. I remember at Bragg, they didn't know what to do with me, so they made me go to the retirement classes, because who gets out at 16 years, but I wasn't retiring. And so I remember going in there, and there's all these colonels and majors, and I knew like half of them because I'd been the aide, there at Bragg for the USOC command. So there's a lot of soft guys in there and a couple like 82nd guys, but they all came up and like, what are you doing? Why are you getting out? And then I realized they all wanted to meet. They all asked to have coffee. They all want to do dinner because they want to know what's next. Like, how did you know?
Yeah.
Because many of them were getting out because they were told it's time to get out. That's a whole different conversation. Some are getting out and they're wanting to go make money. But I think what I found, everybody's looking for purpose, and everybody, especially someone from, that you were born to lead, man. And you were born to be a Ranger. And I always tell my people, if my kid was enlisted in the Rangers, I'd want Matt to be their commander because I knew you truly cared. And you would train them and you would invest in them. And that's one of the highest compliments I can give someone, that I would trust my son in the Ranger Regiment to Matt LeClaire. But I think someone like you and me, we're always looking for mission and for a purpose. Like, we want to do, we didn't do this for money. We did it because we were called to do it. And so when I got out, what I realized, I struggled. I had to drive my first few months. Dad had me working down at our other campus, which is in North Wilkesboro. It's about a 40-minute drive in the morning for me. And so it felt a lot like Fort Bragg because I lived in Whispering Pines. So I had that 50-minute drive into work every day. So it felt similar, but instead of getting there and, going to go work out and do PT and then put my uniform on, and I wasn't doing that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And what I realized, if you had asked me 7 years ago, Edward, what are you? I would have looked at you and looked at my sleeves and looked at my tambourine and said, what, are you blind? I'm an Army Ranger. And I realized I made that tambourine and I made that scroll my identity. And I was wrong for that. That was not my identity. So many in the military, I remember the first time at West Point, I always wanted to be in the military. It was my dream. I had 2 posters on my wall, West Point and Army Ranger. I'm the kid that lived his dream. And how cool is that?
Yeah.
But I remember the first time I put BDUs on, and it had the American flag on my shoulder, and it had U.S. Army, and it had my name on the name tape by U.S. Army. And I walked into Robinson Auditorium there at West Point, and it was our first night meeting, and we just been there, and we just did the oath. And I remember having those BDUs on for the first time and thinking, this is my dream. This is what I was so proud. This is what I always wanted to do my whole life. So when I took that uniform off, I felt like my identity had been stripped away from me. And the Army does a good job at telling you what your identity is. Or better yet, if you want to be an infantry officer, and you and I have had many conversations about this in the past, especially at Bragg when you were down there with ROTC Command, but to be successful, you have to have this job, So, for example, to be a battalion commander, you've had to have an S3 job. You've had to have an XO job done so well. Usually you got to be like a Brigade 3, Brigade XO. That guarantees battalion command. And if you want to be a brigade commander, 06 commander, you got to have this job and this job. And so the Army tells you what success looks like. And I realized as I was getting out and the process decision for me to get out, that's not what success is. And I'm not taking away from the Army and I loved it. I just told you, it's one of the best things that ever happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
But I let my identity be someone else's, or someone else dictate my identity. And I was wrong for that. And I struggled for those first 6 months when I came to Samaritan's Purse. And when I finally surrendered my identity and put it back at the foot of the cross and said, Lord, it's yours. I'm yours. Take me. I'd already left the Army. I already said, Lord, I'm yours. But then I had to give up that identity. And so I think for a lot of people, when they get out and they retire, or I don't matter if you're getting out after 4 years or you're getting out after like 28, 23, whatever, you probably have 26 years. What do you have?
32.
30, gosh, you're old. You look a lot better than 32, but I knew you were getting close to 30. People are going to struggle with what's my identity? Like, what do I do now? And I've met so many people. And so at USASOC headquarters, when I was at JSOC, I would go back over and have dinner with what we call the pasture. It was the old First FC command below the CG's office, and there was 3 colonels in there, and they all wanted to talk to me about what's next. And I found myself not mentoring, but walking through this process with guys I've always called sir and looked up to my whole life. Now, one of them works for me now. He runs my office in Israel, and he ran the CAG, the Commander's Action Group, for the general.
Hmm.
But we sat there and talked about what's next and why I'm doing it. So, I mean, to people listening, at some point, you're going to have to realize what's your identity. And if your identity's in a unit patch, a scroll, a beret, the U.S. Army, you're going to be left pretty stinking empty at the end of this. That's my advice.
Yeah. You dabbled on so many different things, but you said something right there at the end that I wanna talk about. You said what's next, right? And I never thought about this before until recently, when someone always asks you, hey, what's next? Whether you're like 1 year into command or you're halfway through a job, like it almost makes me feel recently as if like what you're doing now is not that important, or what you were just doing wasn't. It devalued it, right? It was like, well, what's next? As if that wasn't good enough. And what are you doing next? What have you done for me lately? You know, like what's next? And I know people don't mean it that way, and I don't think I meant it that way for so many years. But it's something I've thought of recently over the last years. What do you think of when someone said like, what's next to Ed when you were Major, Graham, you know, versus what's next, you know, today?
Yeah. So, I would always, when someone say what's next, I'm thinking of like the next few positions to make sure that I would get the next command. To me, it was all about command and how am I going to get that command?
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the regimental commander sitting down with me when I was the XO, the Special Troops Battalion. I was a task force commander forward, and he brought me back and go, hey, Ed, let's talk about what's next. He's like, what do you want to do next? And I was real confused because he just had a conversation with me before I deployed about going back to be the regimental XO. And I was like, sir, I want to be the regimental XO. And he's like, no, think bigger than that. And I was like, sir, I want to be a Ranger Battalion commander and be the RCO. And he's like, whoa, he's like, slow down here. He's like, what about aide de camp at USASOC? I was like, aide de camp? I was like, no. I was like, I don't want to be a Courtney Massengale. They're once an Eagle reference there. And I didn't realize I didn't have a choice. The boss had come over and interviewed me, and I didn't realize it was an interview. I thought he was asking stuff about the task force I was leading. Apparently that was my job interview, and so I got yanked. So I think in the military, we were always looking, you and me, and I can't put words in your mouth, but we're thinking about command, like probably 2 jobs down the road. But something struck me interesting, and so it's not really my story to tell, and I don't know if it's fair because I've only briefly talked to this man about it. But Dave Webb, who you and I commanded together at 175 with, for those that are listening, this is my brother-in-law. I married his little sister. We were best friends at West Point, so I'm the guy that marries his best friend's little sister. But when Dave was the G3 at the 82nd, the CG was counseling him, and he asked Dave, what's next? And so General Neve gave Dave an example. Like for me, if this doesn't work out after the 82nd, I'm going to go work for this ministry called Samaritan's Purse. And Dave looked at him, was like, are you messing with me, sir? General Neve's like, well, what do you mean am I messing with you? He's like, well, my brother-in-law is the COO at Samaritan's Purse. But I thought it was interesting. Now, obviously, for General Neve, he's not coming to Samaritan's Purse anytime soon. His career's going just fine, Chief of Staff of the Army. But here's a man that was in the eyes of the world has made it, but he was looking beyond the Army about what's next in service. And so when I do look back, I never had a conversation about what's next really without discussing with my wife. To me, my wife and family was the ultimate next, and what I was focused on, what best suited them. There might have been times I look back and was I selfish in a decision I made, but I wanted to make sure my family was successful. And even getting out, the conversation with Kristy actually didn't go well. My wife loved the Army, and she did not want to get out. Well, she struggled too. And at some point, I had to have a conversation with her. I was like, honey, I feel like I'm rowing alone here. I need your help. I actually had to tell her that. And I'm not putting that out to embarrass her. She would tell you the same thing. That's how much she loved it, being an Army spouse. And her identity was in that too. But we knew God had bigger plans. And why I came to that decision, I looked at what I could do in the Army and what I could do outside the Army. I don't think we ever retire, nor should we ever retire. If we were called to leave and serve, then we're going to serve and we're going to lead. And I didn't believe in retirement, even if I retire the Army like you after 30 years and extremely old, which is impressive. You don't have any gray hairs. But
No, yeah.
I'm not going to retire, you know? And so what next for me was serving where the Lord ever took me. And so I remember my kids asking me, Dad, because we moved like, I don't know, 12 times at this point. And they're like, Dad, when we move again, can we do? I'm like, guys, I don't think we're moving again. But I don't know. If God calls me somewhere else, I'll move. That's how this works. But I think I'm here for a while. I've been here for 7 years, longest I've ever been anywhere. But what's next is where God calls me. And that was a whole different conversation, how I got to that point in the Army when I left that decision, my dream jobs. But when his hand moves, I had to hop back in that hand, you know, stay in it. I never hopped out of it. I was trying to just keep, you know, run with it, with the pace of his hand. But for next, it was service, like for the Lord and where he was calling me. And I'd like to think I did that whole time in my military career, but I might have messed that up on a few jobs. You know, I don't know if I was where I was supposed to be, but the Army's where I was supposed to be. That was a calling.
Yeah. And it's Kristy, my Kristy with a C, you know, it's been the same way the last couple of years, you know, like we've talked about it, and we've talked about where we're going to live and what we're going to do and how we're going to lead our life, you know, and it's like, it wasn't like an overnight thing for us. It was more like a gradual thing. And, you know, I often joke a lot when I say, like, how long have you been thinking about retirement? I said, well, since I was a major, and the infantry branch chief told me I would never be a lieutenant colonel because I spent too many years in the Ranger Regiment, right?
I remember you told me that. We ate one time and you were telling me that, and I was like, don't listen to that guy. Like, that's not how this works. Yeah.
He's like, you got too many HQs when you were in the Ranger Regiment. Yeah. All you majors got all, you know, this is what he said. Yeah. This is exactly what he said. He's like, you, Don Neal, Jimmy Howell, and Ed Graham, you guys are all out there, like, you know, getting all HQs in the Ranger Regiment. You guys will never be lieutenant colonels. I think those guys have done just fine, you know, since those days. But right. That was kind of the moment where I said, well, if I'm only going to be able to serve in active duty for a couple more years, I'm going to live those years doing the way I can give back the most, you know, the way I can pay it forward the most. And that's why I wanted to be an ROTC professor of military science. And, you know, jokingly too, like I didn't think I was going to be a lieutenant colonel, so I wasn't preparing for it. And then when you're the one that texted me and it was like, you want to know where you're going next? And I was like, what? I'm staying here at Fort Bragg. And you said, aloha. Yeah. That's what you texted me. I was like, how the hell did you find out where we're going?
That's back when I was in the loop. That's why I'm not in the loop anymore. There's a girl down there that kept me, you know, the little lady in white tennis shoes everyone talks about. Well, she wore stilettos, but there's a little lady in stilettos that ran Officer Manning for special. Yeah. That's how I knew everything. So I still call her when I need help with something. And sure. I remember a while back I was going down I needed help in the Central America. I was like, and I needed to offload our planes at JTF Bravo. And I was like, who do you know at JTF Bravo? And she hooked me up with JTF Bravo. Now my brother-in-law commands it, so I've got a connection for the next year. But now I remember that conversation with you, and that, you know, that's where I look. I was like, the branch chief does not have a say in your career. They have influence, but they don't have a say. Just work hard, and at the end of the day, if you're trying to serve yourself, you're going to fail. It's going to catch up to you. If your point is to serve others and to, you know, mentor others. And that's what I love about your podcast here. And I've listened to a lot of your episodes because I've had so many of my friends or people that I've known on there, and I'm interested in what they had to say. But people are hungry for knowledge and truth and for good counsel. You know, for me, it's godly counsel and wisdom. And that's why I look towards scriptures, but also men and women that I know read the word. I believe in John 17:17 says, thy word is the truth, sanctify them with the truth. I'm only interested in the truth. So I read the word. But think for your podcast, you have always had an interest in developing and bringing up others. I remember the conversations, the LPDs, and the ideas you would throw up with me with your platoon leaders and what you were discussing. And I love the professional development we had at 175, even from our boss at the time, Colonel Foster. He was very interested in developing young officers. And I tried to even bring that here, that same type of development and hunger that you had. You know, I've started a leadership program here at Samaritan's Purse because I wanted I want to influence the next generation. But that's what your podcast is. And so for you, like what's next? I don't know what next is for you. Like you and your wife were like what I think of the perfect team, the command team, because whether it was the enlisted and you all had that background, so you had the enlisted and officer in mind, y'all were the full package. And so what's next? I mean, part of this conversation and this podcast that you have, that's a huge thing of what your next is. I don't think your identity was ever wrapped out in a position or command or a title, Matt. I think your identity was wrapped up in developing and leading others. And we always talk Chris Hallows. So for those listening, it was Dave Webb, Chris Hallows, and Matt LeClaire and I for a while there as command teams at 175. And I couldn't think of a better, like, if I asked for help, you would have helped me, like genuinely, even if it made my company better. Like there was no competition to be the best company commander. It was about lethality for the unit. And we each made ourselves more lethal. But I look back and there was some of the best times I've ever had because I couldn't think of a better team. And that's what you bring, Matt. You bring team, whether it be you and your wife, helping others, discipling others. I've loved just watching you, and it helped me. And in a way, our conversations at Bragg helped me make the decision to get out. And you don't know that probably, but it gave me comfort because I was not talking about getting out. It hit me as soon as I went to the JSOC headquarters. After a few months, I was watching something on the screen one night, and that's when I made my decision to get out.
Mm-hmm.
And you, whether you know it or not, those lunches that we would meet up helped kind of disciple me through that. So thank you.
Yeah, I think it's mutual, like both of us were going through different times in our lives and like, what are we going to do? And what are we doing next? And how do we raise our kids? And, you just kind of constantly bringing in all these variables and stuff like that are going out there. What has been like the biggest surprise since being out that you thought this was going to be a lot harder and it ended up being maybe a lot easier for you?
Yeah. So I talked to you about my identity. That was hard. But one thing I do realize, I thought when I left that headquarters, the special operation headquarters at Bragg, I would never see talent like that again. And man, God slapped me across the face quick when I got to Samaritan's Purse. I call it slumming for Jesus. There's a lot of people here at the ministry that have been called here that are incredible talent, and they could be making a lot of money somewhere else, but they felt called here. And the things that we get to be a part of, the founder of Samaritan's Purse is not my father. It's a guy by the name of Bob Pierce. He started World Vision first and got mad and left and then started Samaritan's Purse. But one of his tenets that he always talked about was God room, that you plan so big and so bold, there's no way that a man can accomplish it, that God gets all the credit and the glory. But to go after the God room type task, those are big, bold, and scary things that you have no business being a part of. Yet you have to assemble, train, equip, prepare, allocate, and then lead some incredible team members to do that. It smells a lot like what we used to do in the Ranger Regiment. Yeah. And that's what I've been surprised coming here. Like, I'm back in the same type of environment and organization that is high performing and at high execution. It's incredible. And I have a hard time keeping up. Sometimes I feel like I'm falling off the boat, and I'm keeping my head up, but just with the talent that's around me. So I'm a huge student and proponent of mission command. I loved it in the military. And I think that's the only reason I might have enjoyed any type of success in the military is because I figured out the key. I'm not the key. The key was find talent, recruit talent, retain talent, give them what they need in the broad left and right limits, task and purpose, come back and tell me if you need something else. I'll be like, yeah or no. And then they go do it. And that's what happens here. And so you asked me what I'm shocked by. I'm shocked by the talent that God has assembled here. And it's a lot of fun. And I get to be part of God room, and I get to see miracles that I have no business being a part of. But God allows me just to touch just a little bit of it and touch his greatness and glory. And that's what I felt about the Ranger Regiment. I remember watching young E5s walk on water on target. Everybody asked, what's your favorite thing about the Ranger Regiment? Young E5s walking on water. Mm-hmm. That was fun. And what they would accomplish that. And I remember Rick Merritt one night we came by and he's like, hey, sir. And he's like, that was great. Great job. We're in Ramadi. I was a platoon leader. And I was like, sir, you should have seen what Sorokin did tonight. And so we just bragged about Sorokin for the next, he was one of my squad leaders. And he was laughing about Sorokin. He'd been mad about Sorokin previously on something else. He stole his canteen cup. And that was a canteen cup that Merritt jumped into Panama with. I could have killed Sorokin. But I miss watching those guys do that. I thought I'd never see it again, and I was wrong. It's here, and it'll be other places that you go. If you go to the right organization or ministry, you're going to see talent that just blows you away.
Yeah, I'm so thankful that you said that because, every time for the last, it's been about 10 years. Every time I say something to Kristy and I'm like, oh, especially in the Army, or this happens in the Army, she says, that happens like outside the Army too. Like it happens at the hospital, my good friends at Google, Billy Oslin and George Sterling, like they say the same things happen at Google. Like some things are different. Maybe the clothes are different, but like the talent is the same. The team building is the same. People are passionate. They wake up early, excited to go, do what it is they do. And it's been such a great reminder. And now I'm seeing it even more and more that there's, I don't want to say so much more, but there's so much also outside the Army, and there's so much ability to make a difference in people's lives. It doesn't have to end. It's not like you're closing this chapter and opening up a new chapter or a whole nother thing. It's more of a continuation of the things that we've been doing for so many years, and maybe the talents and the strengths that we've been getting over the years.
Yeah. I've had some people. I've had even some not immediate family members, but I've had some even family members that say, "Oh, you're broken goods. You can't bring what you did in the military to the ministry. It won't work." And I was like, at the time, I was just like, how could you say something so foolish? And now that I've had time to reflect back, how could you say something so foolish? Like, there's great things we did in the military. I'm not trying to make Samaritan's Purse the military. As a matter of fact, I didn't hire a single military person until this year. I've been my wife gave me some great counsel and wisdom. She was like, Edward, a lot of people are going to want to come and work with you or ask you to come. And she's right. My phone did and has blown off the hook. But this year I finally started hiring talent, and I actually hired my first Ranger. I've hired 2 this year. Our re-enlistment NCO down at 175. He's working down in Texas doing disaster relief. You may remember him, Chisholm. And then I've hired Roy Young, Sergeant Major Roy Young, to come work for me, because there's some things that we did so well when it came to planning, resourcing, training, equipping, after action reviews to get better. I need that here. Like nothing more brutal than a Ranger after action review. I need honesty here, and let's get better. And so that type of talent I recruit, but it's here. They problem solve differently. That training and building a team is going to be the same no matter where you are. It's just your baseline may be different. Like you said, we're not showing up doing PT in the morning. Not all my team may be animals like beast, but what they do after an earthquake in Venezuela, or right now in the DRC with Ebola, and putting together a hospital, like we can have a hospital anywhere in the world in 36 hours. There's only a few countries that can do that. Israel can do that, United States, Russia, China, very few, but there's no like organizations that can go out there and with their own cargo planes set up a hospital with their own hospitals anywhere in the world. That takes talent to lead that, to train that and equip that. And you worked with me, I'm not smart enough to come up with that idea. That's God room, and that's the people that he brought to the team. So there's a lot of similarities. I just tell you, don't run from what you learned in the military. Be proud of that. Going into whether it's a corporate world or retirement job, or you're just getting out after 6 years, take what you did well and learn well, and then you got to adapt and apply it to the appropriate situation. We learn to be adaptive in the military. Well, be adaptive. Yeah, it's not the same. Don't talk the same. Get away from acronyms and stuff like that. But there's too many similarities, and you are too valuable, and the military has invested so much into you that the regular world is going to eat that up.
Yeah. It's easier to do now as you start to reflect and you look back on what are the things that you're using today and this month. You said adaptive and you said some of those things, but what are some of those things today that you're using that you look back and you say, these are the perfect examples of like something that someone says is going to be important later on in life, or maybe they didn't even know it was going to be important in life, but you're applying that, immediately into what it is you're doing on most days now.
Yeah. So there's a couple things I look back, discussions I had with people before I even went into the military. I realized how much I learned or how much I use that today and shape what I do in ministry. One was a pastor in Beirut, Lebanon, who came and very influential in my dad's life. But he asked me one time, he goes, "Edward, are you a coward?" I was like 12 years old watching a sunrise in Jackson Hole, Wyoming with him. And I was drinking Maxwell House coffee. I don't know why I remember, but it was horrible coffee. And we're sitting there drinking. He goes, "Are you a coward?" And he goes, "Edward, don't ever send somebody to work for me in the mission field that doesn't leave their own family and their next door neighbor to Christ. If they can't lead their next door neighbor or their own family members to Christ, they're a coward, and I don't want them. Anyone can talk to a stranger about Christ. You got nothing to lose. I want someone that's willing to lose it all." And that's pretty heavy for a young kid. I didn't know what he's talking about. I think he was the first man that knew I was going to be sending people overseas, to do ministry. And I've talked to him since then, and he just smiled and winked. And he's like, he talks like this. He's like, "Sometimes God tells me, But I used that because when I got out of the Army, I had to call him and I had to ask him, "Uncle Sammy, am I a coward?" But I look back at the tools that the military equipped me. I've already talked about Mission Command and how much I love Mission Command and how I use it here. But there's something else that you and I were trained and it was instilled into us, and that's prudent risk-taking. I think what I do now, it is essential in order to be part of success and going back to be, when I say success, I'm talking about God's success, and to be part of his God room that I talked about before, you have to be willing to have leaders that take prudent risk. You remember we used to, when we had to do investigations, you had to look at different types of, like, if someone made a mistake and you're trying to assess like responsibility, like, hey, this was an honest mistake. Or, and you start looking at risk and what kind of risk taking he was on. So I remember going through those when we were doing 15-6s and what type of error was this? Was this egregious? Was this careless, frivolous? And so I don't want frivolous risk takers here. I want prudent risk takers at the ministry. I want people that are willing to get out of the boat. And this is ultimately the story about why I got out of the Army. We can maybe talk about that later, is I wanted to be part of a miracle. So I had to get out of the boat, and that goes along with the scriptures, where Peter walked on water, and that's ultimately what I read one day when I decided to get out. But I want people here willing to walk on water, to lay it all on the line, willing to make a mistake. But to do that, I got to create an environment that I'm not going around slapping hands and, people are afraid of taking a risk or afraid of failure. I want people not afraid of failure. And the military and the Army doing live fires and preparing for combat, TFTs, all that prepared us that we were going to make mistakes in training, don't do it in combat. Now, if we had a platoon leader that always made mistakes, well, we fired him. Yeah. He made a platoon sergeant that always made mistakes, well, we fired him. So that makes sense. I do that here. If you keep making mistakes and you're not learning from it, well, that's stupid if I keep you in position. And so I'm looking for those risk takers. The other thing that I'm something I learned from the military that I still use today, and I'm looking at it. It is better if it doesn't get better with time. If there's an issue, hit it head on. Like, "Hey, buddy, you and I are having a problem. I'm not getting through to you." Don't run away from conflict. Sometimes in the Christian community, conflict, people want to avoid it. Pastors try to avoid conflict in a church. And when you avoid conflict, and when you try to suppress it, it only festers. It only gets worse. So sometimes this is where people accuse me of being too military, is that maybe I'm too confrontational. I'm not being confrontational. I just see, hey, we have a problem. We're wasting time, and we're wasting. Samaritan's purse is built off donations. Well, I call it the widow's mite from the story in Scripture about she gave all she could because it belonged to the Lord. She gave just cents, pennies. We're built off people giving their pennies to Samaritan's purse. I don't want to waste the widow's mite. And so I hit confrontation. I just move it right on. And then if you're a problem, like we learned in the Ranger Regiment, RFS you, release for standards, get you out of here, and finally put someone else in the job and move on.
Yeah. I saw the picture that you sent me the other day, and you meant to show me a picture of your boot and your torn Achilles. But what I saw was you were reading the Working Genius Pat Lencioni, and I've read everything that he's published, out there. How are you on the flip side? Saying, figuring out what people's strengths are, the things that they're God put them on this earth to do, right? And you're like, I can see that in them, and I'm going to put this person in position to be the most successful. How are you doing that? I'm sure that's something you learned also in the Army.
Yeah. And you know what? I have a lot of fun doing that. That's like just walking around. I'm seeing a problem. Something's not getting done. Like I had an issue in our military ministry. We do a wounded veteran ministry up in Alaska called Operation Heal Our Patriots. And I needed a new leader. And one day I just walked by, and this guy that works in my IT department, who was in the Marines as enlisted young in his life, but been at Samaritan. He was a walk-on at App State football and been at Samaritan's personnel for like 20 years. He just happened to walk by me at devotions in the morning before we start work. And he's like, "Hey, Edward." And I was like, "Come here." And I was like, "Get on my calendar. We're gonna have a meeting, and after this." And we did. I made him the director of Operation Heal Our Patriots, like that. Why? Because I needed someone that could be steady Eddie, who could lead some former military chaplains and direct our ministry up in Alaska. And he was gifted for that. And he's done a great job. As I look after Hurricane Helene, Helene happened in my backyard where I'm sitting right now. The water was right up to the doors outside of us, and we're like 5 feet in the air. West North Carolina got hammered, and I was an idiot. I was trying to do we started a helicopter lift operation with our own personal helicopters that we have for ministry. But then I started getting NASCAR helicopters coming to fly for. I know a lot of team owners. And I was trying to control it all on my cell phone like I was a young Ranger platoon leader again. And I was on an interview with Dr. Phil, and I was looking at my phone, and I had helicopters going all the wrong directions. And I just took my phone, I slid it off the table, and I was like, I'm an idiot. So I went into my international department, and the team that handles our international deployments, I was like, you, get in here. And we whiteboarded for 5 minutes. I left, I did an interview, I came back, finished the whiteboards, and in one day, they built the largest civilian airlift in history. And one of them's a former military guy. He was an ADA officer, but he understood what I was trying to tell him in the whole whiteboard session. Huh. And we built the largest civilian airlift in history, but I found the right guy to do it. And I was like, hey, it's not your normal day job, but this is what you're going to do. And it was like that conversation I had with Rick Merritt, about E5s walking on water. Like, is incredible what he did. And then also in Helene, we were growing. It grew so much that I had to split a department that just did disaster relief in our rebuild programs, because we also build homes after storms for uninsured and non-insured. Well, we had, multiple rebuilds going on around the country from previous storms. And you're building over 500 homes. That's a huge undertaking, building 500 homes. So I needed the guy that ran the disaster relief. I moved him over to rebuilds. And then one of my old roommates from Liberty, I went to Liberty for 1 year before West Point. I was like, you're the right man for the job. Dad agreed, and we made him a vice president. Mm-hmm. But it's finding those talents and those people that that are ready to step up to the next challenge. Like in a live fire, when the weapons squad leader had to go do some professional training, NCO school. Well, who's stepping up to be the weapons squad leader? Mm-hmm. Well, the most senior leader. This is your chance to learn, get over there, and you watch, and they almost always hit home runs. You just got to give them the opportunity to stand up and do it. And that's my favorite part of the job, finding talent, equipping them, and letting them go do that. I love that. That to me, that's what gets me excited. Yeah.
You're dabbling into the next part I want to talk about is like you said, relationships. Okay. What you said is understanding what people's strengths and weaknesses are, right? But you did that because you've been able to develop a relationship with so many different types of people from so many different walks of life, from so many different parts of the country, from the world for that matter, right? Mm. As you've started to transition, there are probably people that were your friends before that you're not as close to anymore, or they see you kind of go up in the world and they're like, I could never text Ed Graham, he's moved on from us, or he's so much, out there with the people that you're dealing with. He doesn't have time for me. How have you maintained relationships or built those relationships so that years later, 10 years later, you can go back to a roommate from West Point, a roommate from Liberty, and you can say, it's been a few years since we talked, or 6 months, but it's like it was yesterday, and I need your help with something.
Yeah, that's a great question. My wife, she does, this is one of those compliments she gives me, that I do a good job of keeping in touch with people. I mean, we've got technology at our disposal. I think even just a simple text of like, man, how you doing? It came to mind. I had a pastor one time when I was a kid. I'm reaching into my pocket right now holding my phone, but this is such a great tool just to send a text, like, hey, I'm thinking about you. Or if I see something in a video, I'll send it to them like, hey, this reminded me of you. How you doing? How's your wife? How can I pray for you? And if I tell you I'm praying for you, I want to be sincere about it. I'll pray. I'll add you to my prayer list, and then I'm going to follow up, later on, like, hey, how's your daughter doing? And, post surgery, is she doing better? I think when you tell people you're praying for them, I hear that a lot. Sometimes I wonder, are you really praying for them? And so I try to be very intentional about that. But I look at where I am today is not a reflection of anything I've done. I was not a good student at West Point. I struggled. I had to study hard. I had classmates and upperclassmen and teachers that invested in me, and they worked with me, and they helped me get through the academic portion of it. My military career, I didn't get the branch I wanted coming out of West Point because of my grades, but I had commanders that believed in me and worked with me and helped me get into the infantry while I was at the Ranger Regiment. I was one of the few guys that went from being an FSO in the Rangers to being a Ranger platoon leader. And like, how cool is that? But someone, took a chance on me, and they took risk. That's why I like risk takers. But for those type of people that invest in me, I want to keep in touch with them. Plus, I'm hungry for the knowledge they still have and relationships. But I'm just trying to when you come out of the military, so many people because we move around so much. So it is hard to keep in touch with everybody. But I still need help in what I'm doing now. I still need advice, and I still need counsel. And so those friendships are important to me. And I think you have to be deliberate with them. You do have to make time. One of my old platoon leaders from 375 and classmate, he just hit me up, and he wants to get together with Donnie and another platoon leader. For those that are listening, Donnie was my first sergeant, my platoon sergeant, and then eventually the RSM at the Ranger Regiment. Donnie's a beast. But just, hey, let's go to a football game. And I'm like, you know what? I don't have time on my calendar, but I'm going to do that because that's my family. And the family's important to me. And so that's why I make time. But don't ever think a text is too simple. Some people don't like text or phone call. I'm big on FaceTime. You probably remember I FaceTime you all when we do talk, It's usually on FaceTime. Why? I want to see your face. Not that you're handsome, but I think facial expressions, it shows that, it's if you can't be there in person, then FaceTime. That's what God's given us in technology.
Yeah, I think I got about 4 or 5 just recently where it's like the last time I was out on Palm Circle and you FaceTime me, and I was like, I got to walk away from this formation and like just pick up the phone and like talk to you. And so I'll share a few of those pictures. I was on the phone the other day. Last week I was on the phone with Mike Albaugh, and I was asking
Love Albaugh. You guys were such a great but I love that Mike Albaugh. He's what a great guy.
Me too, because in so many different ways, like I've called on him and I was like, hey, I'm going through this situation. What are your thoughts? Just like when he's your first sergeant and you ask, like, we had, a death in the company, and it's like, hey, how do you think we should handle this? I had a challenge with a sergeant major at one point, and I was like, hey, how do you think I should go through this? And his advice was always so spot on. But what I asked him the other day is, I was like, how often do people reach out to you now that you've been out of the Army for about a year? And he said, not as much as I thought it would be. And he says, we just get so busy with our life, and it's one thing to the next. And you do talk to some of your closest friends, but not like like when we were in, like you'd see 100 people a day, and you probably get 50 text messages a day. Just since I changed command on Wednesday, like my emails have cut to 10%, and I've gotten out of the 2 group chats that I was in, and I'm down to, the only text messages I'm getting back are the ones I'm sending out, and they're close friends right now. So it's kind of dwindled really quickly since then. And that's what Mike said.
Well, you bring up a good point. So you and I both worked for Mike Foster, and he'd always send like just a simple text that said like sit rep, like that's him just checking in, and I'm like, hey boss, doing good. And he's always been like an encourager when I got out and like hitting me up like, hey, do you need anything? Thinking about you. And so I had a pastor a long time ago that taught me about UPS trucks. When you see a UPS truck, that means urgent prayer support. So if whoever comes to mind when I see a UPS truck, I pray for them right then, and then I call them and I hit them up, like, how you doing? If they don't answer, I leave a message or I text them like, hey, just came to mind. And I realize how many times that God uses that alone, that he's put someone in my heart that does need, like, is struggling, hurting, or just needs to talk. And so, you bring up Alba. I remember a few years ago, I was asked to speak down at SOCOM at their big soft conference. And I happened to be down there. Donnie was there, Sergeant Major Merrick and Alba were there. And they're like, hey, let's link up for breakfast. And I sit there and I'm eating breakfast with three legends where we grew up. And I'm getting counsel from them. And the same thing, like, we need to, as leaders, stay engaged and look for those type of people. And you need to surround yourself with people that are going to tell you stink. Like, hey, suck it up, sir, or you smell. And so even here at the ministry, I try to find people that are going to tell the boss, like, you have a problem, or something's not going on right, and they need to address it. And the same thing needed to happen. If you look and do case studies in the military, and you'll see a unit fails when a leader couldn't be told something or couldn't be wrong. Part of that fellowship and that network we have is important for that. But you talked about, when you left command, you got out of certain chats. Well, then that's on you as a leader too, to go get involved in things. And then you plug in with others. It may not be in the military, and definitely it's not going to be in your old command because you're not in command of it anymore. Mm-hmm. Of course, that's going to drop off. I remember squad leaders calling me and frustrated about stuff in DECO after I left. And I'm like, you go to your first sergeant. Go to your new commander. That is not, you're going to the wrong person. That's not fair to the new commander. Like, I love you. You can come over here and talk all you want. And you can complain, and I'll listen, but I'm not going to, I'm not going to advise you on how to move forward. But of course that stuff's going to fall off. But I think it's all about staying involved and staying connected. And you'll find that purpose and mission where God calls you. Get outside your comfort zone. That happens to a lot of military people. They look at retirement like, I've made it. I'm supposed to take it easy and relax. Well, if you take it easy and relax, then your phone's not going to ring anymore. And so you can't have both worlds. I look at it as, I don't believe in retirement, and that we keep working, staying. Yeah, we may need to take a breather and put your family and prioritize them and put them first. I'm not saying be an idiot, but I don't also think we're supposed to sit on our heels and just relax and coast off into the sunset after that. If that's what you want, go do it. It's not what I wanted. And I have a whole different network now that I got to manage, but I also try to make it deliberate where I don't turn my back on the family that raised me. And I look back to my military family, and everybody had a part in investing in me, and I loved it. And I miss it. I have no regrets. I'm not going back. And the thing about the Army, the day I left, it didn't skip a beat. As good as I thought I was, the Army didn't even notice I left. And Matt, I hate to tell you, you have friends and people that are going to miss Matt LeClaire, but the Army keeps on trucking. And,
Amen.
Yeah, we're not that missed.
Yeah. A good friend of mine, Chris Judge, when I was out in Italy, he asked me, like, hey, how's it going in Italy? You're a battalion XO. It's a very busy time. Russia just invaded Ukraine the first time. And I was like, it's great, man. Like, I love being like second in charge of a battalion. I love what I do. I love the people I'm doing it with. But man, it's like every 5 seconds, someone's either emailing me or walking in my office with some form of a crisis. Like, it's the biggest thing going on in their world. And and I'm like, it's a lot. And he goes, soak it up, man. The worst thing in the world is when no one's bringing you crisis, and because they don't feel like you can help them. You've got nothing,
right,
to do to help them.
That's great advice. You may remember, so the guy that started Liberty University, his name is Jerry Falwell, and I went to Liberty, so I called him Uncle Jerry. If you remember, there's a movie, and I don't recommend going to see it, called People versus Larry Flint. Mm-hmm. And Larry Flint ran Hustler Magazine. He's the founder of Hustler Magazine. Well, Jerry and Larry found themselves in a lawsuit against each other, and that's kind of what the movie's about. Later in life, Larry, who's crippled, he was in a wheelchair, he would become friends with Jerry. They became lifelong friends after the lawsuit. And so one day, Jerry's son, Jonathan, who's now the chancellor at Liberty University, is a pastor. They were flying on Larry Flint's plane coming back from an interview. And he's like, Dad, why are we hanging out with Larry Flint? He's like, one day Larry Flint's life is going to come falling apart, son. And I want to be the person that earns the right for the phone call. So as commanders, as company commanders or XOs, what I loved and what I still love today is the knock at the door. You earn the knock at the door. Jerry called it, earn it for the phone call. I want the knock at the door that says, sir, can we talk? In the military, I could not stand up in my formation and I couldn't preach the gospel. I couldn't evangelize. I was not allowed to do that. But I lived my life separately. I was one of the few Ranger officers that probably didn't dip, drink, smoke, Copenhagen. I didn't. My vice was sweet tea from Bojangles. But I wanted to live my life. So when they knocked on my door and said, hey, sir, my wife's leaving me. Or, hey, sir, I'm in debt, or I'm having trouble with painkillers. Or even better yet, hey, she's finally pregnant. Like, I love the victory conversations.
Yeah.
So today, for the first few years, I did get a lot of still military conversations, but I'm aging out. Like, a lot of the guys are retiring, or there's still a bunch in, but I am aging out. So thus there is going to be an attrition of those phone calls. But I love earning the right for the phone call. And I still get there. Like, I just had my RTO, Larry, who's still in. He just hit me up and asking for a sit rep check-in and tell me about what he's working on. I love that. Like, earn the right for the knock at the door.
Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about like our kids? Both of our kids are going through, our transitions. Like my kids are a little bit older, right? But you're going through it now. First one's out of the house. Ours, the last one, just is out of the house. But one, as a parent, just demonstrating the right way to live your life, right? Your kids deserve to see mom and dad out there passionate about what they do and out there getting after it and leading, out there. So you're demonstrating it for them. But like, what are you going through? And you and Kristy, like as parents now, you did this for other people who were raising families, but now you're the one raising a family and you're trying to set a good example for everybody in that area.
I look back, my wife's an Army brat, so it's all she ever knew. And I look back, and I think my kids so far have turned out pretty good. We've given them a unique experience where half their lives was in the military, and now we've never moved again. We're in the same town. And so I asked my kids, I was like, do you miss that, the military life? And they all say, no, we love the friends and stay in place. So they're happy where they are. But if I'd stayed in the military and they knew no different, they'd be thriving too. I think for us in work, I remember coming home, 7, 8 at night, maybe catching the tail end of dinner, kissing them, reading a book with them, putting them in the bed, and then be gone before they ever got up in the morning. I do like the life I have now where, I can be in a meeting and I can tell my assistant, hey, I'm going to this football game, cancel that. Or I got to, my wife needs help. I got to go pick up the kids. If I'm here, I travel a lot, so I am gone still a lot. But I try to prioritize my kids, and I want them to know that I love them, and I love whether they're successful in sports or not, or in school. I want to be there, and that I love them unconditionally. I'll be honest with them. I'll speak truth with them. But the biggest thing as a father, what I've had to learn to do, and I don't know if it's a generational thing before us, but I'll apologize to my kids, and I've messed up many times. My youngest son's adopted. I adopted him when I was from China, when I was the aide, USASOC. And he's taught me more about grace and forgiveness than I'll ever teach him. He's been so patient, those shortcomings and failures that I've had in trying to train him. Teaching him English, to let him know that he's loved because he was 4.5 when we adopted him. And so we had a lot to work through. We're still working through things. But I want my kids to know that I love them unconditionally. And when I mess up, I identify when I mess up and I tell them I'm sorry. I try to lead them through example. I try to read the word at night with them and pray with them. When I mess up in front of their mother or I don't treat their mother with respect, I apologize to her and to the kids in front, which is I'm not going around and being nasty to my wife, but I may be short-tempered one night and I'm like, I'm sorry, honey. And so those are the examples I try to teach them. But just like we talked about, where I want to give my kids the opportunities to take risk and fail. And it's okay. Teach them how to fail, how to recover from that. I teach them if they start something, I want them to finish it, even if they don't like it. But sorry, you started it. You're going to finish this season. But man, I love being a dad. And I'm in a weird transition right now. And we're all going to go through transitions in life. The whole, kindergarten stage to middle school. And right now I've got kids in middle school, one in high school, and one in college. You're going into empty nest phase. And now you're going to parent from afar. before you know it, you got kids getting married, and as old as you are, Matt, you're going to have the grandfather phase, before you know it. But I, for me, I just dropped my daughter off at college, and I'm struggling with that. I miss her, and she's my oldest, and she went through all the deployments, and she's a champ. But I'm excited for her because this is that phase that I remember going through and going off to West Point. When I told her, when I sat her down the night she was leaving, I was like, honey, I left when I was 18 years old, and I never came home again. I visited, and you can always, I was like, maybe you come back and live for a while. I don't know, but this is always your home. I love you unconditionally, and you can always come home to me. But if you never do, I love you unconditionally, and I'm your biggest fan. I don't know if she's moving back. And so as I raised my kids, I talked about identity and my value and success in life. I was wrong for letting the military tell me what success was, because the military is on a value success of my career, my performance, and it's individual. They say they care about families, but as an enterprise, it doesn't. You'll have commanders that do, and you'll hear lip service to stuff. But as an enterprise, it's interested in winning our nation's wars, and it should be. It's up to us as individuals and us as leaders to let those families and because you are more lethal with a successful family. But we also pride ourselves too much on that next promotion. And it took my wife always to get to the next promotion, and she was very much a part of it. But that is not our identity. We need to be more interested in what our kids are going to turn out and what they're going to look like and what they're going to call you in 20 years than what your Rangers are going to call you. And so when I talk about earning the right for the phone call, I'd rather my kids still be calling me at the end of this. I'm not their friend and their buddy, but I want to be their dad. I don't want to be their father. And I think there's a big difference between a father and a dad. And we need to work hard on being dads in the military and coming out of this still being their dad.
Yeah. When you talk about your kids and the things that you want to do for your kids, one of the big themes this whole conversation was how to take a leap of faith and how to know when you're being called to do something. That's easier at our age, right? As we have kids now, we've gotten married, we're starting to figure those things out. But for folks that are 18, they're taking a leap of faith. It's the biggest thing that's gone on ever in their life, right? What is your advice for the people that are like, yeah, I'm years away from where Matt and Ed are at right now, but I'm going through this? And I often say, focus on what you're being asked to do right now. Be the absolute best at what it is you're doing right now. And then we'll cross some of those bridges when we get to it. And you can kind of try to change the world, try to make a miracle by getting out of the boat, like later on when you're going through it. It's okay if you don't know what your overall purpose in life is. What are your thoughts on on all that?
Yeah. So great question. And I'm actually going to lead into getting out of the boat because I think the military prepared me. It spent its whole time preparing me for that one decision, and that's to get out. I've always lived, I hate school. I did not like college. I was at Liberty for a while. I had AP credit going into Liberty University. I was playing soccer there. But when I left Liberty, I was technically a sophomore because I already went in with so much credit from AP classes and college credit. I was going to graduate early. I was like, great, I hate school. I'm going to get out of here as quick as possible. I could care less how many soccer years I had. But then I realized I made a mistake. I wasn't living my dream and applied to West Point, and I had to start all over. Like West Point's mandatory 4 years. So it doesn't matter. I had 2 years at Liberty done. I was starting, I threw it away. And that's okay. God had a plan. I get to West Point, didn't make the best grades, didn't get the branch I wanted, but that's okay. God had a plan. And when I was at the Ranger Regiment as an FSO, which is one of the best jobs in the military, Ranger Fire Support Officer is a blast. I mean, and I hit it just right, had great deployments, and then we got it on. And I learned so much, but it afforded me, I had commanders that took a risk in me. They're like, Edward, heard you want to be a platoon leader, that you wanted infantry. I was like, yes, sir. They let me switch over. Like, to be a platoon leader in the Ranger, you've had to done it in the regular Army and done well at it. I didn't have to do that process. I went straight into be a Ranger platoon leader. But then later in life, my career, in the eyes of the world, it was foolish to get out because I'd had all the Kingmaker jobs, and more than likely I was going to be a Ranger battalion commander. I could see the writing on the wall. Doesn't mean it's going to happen. There's something called a smooth board, but I knew what some of my superiors wanted on me. But I left it all behind when God's hand moved. because my whole life has been prepared of kind of like doing the harder thing, like, getting outside your comfort zone. Don't be comfortable. And so every decision I made, I looked at it, and I didn't look at it through the eyes of the world and the lens of what would the world do. What is going to make me better at the end of this? And so I decided West Point was going to make me and take me where God wanted me to be. I decided the Ranger Regiment was going to make me and take me where I need. If I hadn't gone to the Ranger Regiment, I could have taken an easy path in the artillery and been very successful. I chose to be an FSO, and that was a fight. It was a fight coming out of the 80s. The division commander wanted no one going to the Ranger Regiment. I had a battalion commander that went and fought for me to go and put his career on the line. That's a whole longer story. But going there set up everything else for me to get to the point in my life where I was reading my quiet time one night, and I read the story of Peter walking on water. And when Peter walked on water, I think for many people reading that story, we look, if you take your eyes off Jesus, you'll sink. And that's a good story. That's a good lesson from it. But what I read, that Peter was in his comfort zone. He was surrounded by his peers. He was in a nice, comfortable boat. But Jesus Christ was in the storm and out in the water. Made no sense going to him. It's safer to stay in the boat. If you want to be part of a miracle in life, you got to get out of the boat. And that's why I made the military become my comfort zone. I was surrounded by my peers. I'd figured out how to be successful. And ministry scared me. And to be honest, being a Graham scared me. I was running a little bit from that because the expectation was you got to be Billy Graham or you got to be Franklin Graham. No, it's okay just being Edward Graham. Did my own path, but I needed to get out of my comfort zone again. And that's why I left. So that's the whole story about walking on water and getting in. I'm treading water, so I'm not walking on it. But God's hand moved. And it all started because I watched an objective on the screen one night in the Jock when I was at Fort Bragg. And it's a house I've been in twice before. And you were next door to it one night, to be honest, when you were out there. But I went there as a lieutenant, captured the father. Years later, as a task when I was the bashing commander, I killed the son, who was now the head and the emir of Al-Qaeda out there. And now the other son's there. And he went home to visit mama. I was like, this doesn't end. And I want to be part of something that lasts forever. And so I left and went to the ministry. But the Army prepared me for that decision.
Yeah. I like how you said it prepared me to be part of something forever. I'd love to wrap it up with, how to be a part of something forever. And I think it's friendship. I think it's relationships. I think it's our family. And so like if we bring it all back at the end of the day, like who's going to be there with you when in the long run, it's going to be your family. It's going to be your closest of friends. I see you as one of my closest of friends and the people that would pick up the phone no matter what country you're in, even if it's the frickin' Ukraine, you're like, I'll call you back in a couple of days or I'll text you and tell you all about it when it's all over. You've always been one of those persons that was, on my short list. You'd pick up the phone when I needed it. You'd have this conversation when I needed it, but you'd also be paying it forward for not just me, but for anybody that I surround myself with that would benefit from having this conversation with you.
Well, and you bring up a good point about our families and our friends. I already told you the story about the pastor in Beirut, Lebanon. He asked me if I was a coward, and I look back at my military career, and there was times I was a coward where I didn't tell my friends the truth. It says in John 17:17, sanctify them with the truth. Thy word's the truth. Anything I've said today on here, those are just my words and opinions, but Scripture is the truth. And so for my family and getting out, I want my kids, what does this look like at the end? For so long, my identity was in a career. I think I was a good dad in the Army, but I was so focused on that career and wanted to be the regimental RCO, the regimental commander, or at least a battalion commander. I wanted to be an 06 commander. And from there, to be honest, I thought I wanted to be a general officer. Was I sacrificing my kids and my relationship with? There's nothing easy about the military. There's nothing easy about raising kids. But I want my kids to have a relationship with Jesus Christ. And I want my kids to know and have their hope and trust in Jesus Christ and to follow him. And so probably wasn't being the best father in that. I put a lot of that on my wife's shoulder, and still at some aspects I'm busy here, and that happens. We're a team effort. But for those that are listening, if I have friends that are listening and with you on here, I want you to know that I love you so much that I want you to know the truth, that God loves you. And he sent his only son, Jesus Christ, to die on a cross. That's why I left the military, is I wanted to be part of something forever, and I believe the kingdom of Jesus Christ lasts forever. Death isn't permanent. In the military, we were very good at delivering death. We were very good at it. But death is not permanent. What comes after death is, there's a decision, there's a judgment, heaven or hell, and both of those are permanent. Hell's permanent too. And I want people to know that they're loved, and they're loved so much that God sent his only son. And so I'm not evangelist like my grandfather. I'm not going to sit in stadiums and speak to thousands like Billy Graham. I go to individuals, one or two in the ditch with our teams. And most of the time it's allowing teams to go and equipping them to go. But we go to people that couldn't make it to the stadiums to hear the gospel. We go at war, famine, pestilence, something kept them from getting to the stadium. To me, the kingdom lasts forever. That's why I came. So for those that are getting out, my encouragement, or those that are in the military and they're looking and they're saying, what's next? Because we talked about that today. It doesn't matter if you stay in the military, and what's next is a long, professional, successful career like Colonel Matt LeClaire. But at some point, it's going to end. The lights of that career will turn off. So what's next? To me, it should always be building in service to the Lord and to his kingdom. It belongs to him in the first place. Your career, everything you're part of, is for him. If it was all about a career, a job, or command, you're going to be left empty. Your marriage will be empty. Your kids will be empty, because at some point that light switch turns off, and what's going to fill your cup at that point? And so I learned that pretty early on, but I have to even remind myself here with work at Samaritan's Purse. It's not about the position of COO, being the COO of Samaritan's Purse, and eventually the CEO of Samaritan's Purse. God's already got that picked out or ordained. My job is to serve, but to love my wife, to serve my family, and to share the gospel around the world. And so that's my encouragement to you all. Surrender that identity, to put it at the foot of the cross. But I've got no regrets about where God took me or how he used me, the people he put in my life. Man, I've had it good.
You sure have, and I appreciate it. I appreciate, again, selfishly, I'm the one that benefits the most from these conversations. I get to take this. This is how I started my day. We started this before the sun came up, and the sun's coming up right now. I'm not sure if you heard, the music went off, the cannon went off a little bit, about 45 minutes ago. But
now you're rubbing it in. It's funny, I missed that stuff. I would. But some parts when you're there, you take it for granted, or you roll your eyes. So for those that are still in it, just enjoy where you are. It's a great place. Yeah,
enjoy where we're at today. And Kristy and I got a long day ahead of us on a Friday. It's Friday. We made it to this day. So, this was a great way to start off my day. I can't wait to share this episode with everybody.
Thanks, Matt. Appreciate it, and I miss you, buddy.
All right, we'll talk soon. Thanks for listening today. I hope we sparked some thoughts about the people that have inspired you to be who you are today. I hope you share some of your thoughts, and better yet, demonstrate them for the people in your life. Our pursuit is to get a little bit better every day. Progress equals small victories stacked on top of each other, building like compound interest. Keep stacking these positive habits like getting up early, working your butt off, learning something new, being positive, and surrounding yourself with phenomenal people. Please share your comments at the links in the show notes, and DM us at Teach Me to Fish podcast on Instagram or Facebook. Looking forward to our next conversation.
Times don't fly too high. Be sure to keep the ground in sight. Fly forever if you keep it tight. Love the world, but keep the sky on your mind.